Shabbat Shalom, my friends. Quick question. What Jewish holiday is next up on our calendar? Okay? Got it? Right. The 15th day of the month of Shvat, Tu B'Shvat, the New Year of Trees. And this year we celebrate that on January 25th. If you and the organizations to which you belong are concerned about the environment, and I know that you are, use Tisha B'Av as the hook to draw people in. By the way, if you guessed that Valentine's Day was the next day up on the Jewish calendar, well, on the Jewish calendar, the Day of Love actually doesn't arrive until August 19th. Our Sedra is Va'era, Exodus chapter 6, verse 2 and following. Moses and God are negotiating the terms under which a very reluctant Moses will return to Egypt. The term sheet, there was a term sheet, includes the following. 1. Moses can tell the people that God is now ready to redeem them. Footnote, the people didn't much care. They didn't buy in. Okay, 2. An uncomfortable speaker. God will also provide Moses with someone who will do the big speeches in Moses' name. Who? You know, Moses' brother, Aaron. That piece of the term sheet seemed to work. Next, since God understands that Pharaoh is not at all interested in letting the Israelites go, the next item on the term sheet is a promise that God will supply Moses with a set of really unusual things, like turning his staff into a serpent. Unfortunately, footnote, this did not impress Pharaoh very much at all. And now, the biggest promise on the term sheet, a series of plagues that will wear the Egyptians down so that they're going to be glad to get rid of the Israelites. Our Sedra ends with the plague of Arov, insects. Thus, Moses has in hand a bunch of promises from God. And as for the Israelites, they're still slaves. So much for making a business deal with God. Okay. This past week I was reading through a Torah commentary by Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. It was great stuff. And I came across a wonderful statement. You know the kind of statement that you wish you had made and then after a period of time you actually believe you did? Sacks teaches that the entire Exodus account is merely a tutorial about freedom. Basically, the book of Exodus through Deuteronomy, a tutorial about freedom. I like that. I really like that. And there's an additional twist for us this year. Martin Luther King's birthday is, by federal mandate, observed on the third Monday in January, which this year, guess what, hits on January 15th, our weekend. So what does that tutorial about freedom have to say to us on this weekend of celebration? First of all, no matter what your external circumstances, you are never really free until you want to be free. As miserable as the life of the Israelite slaves was, they, the slaves, were not demanding their freedom. Their spirits had been crushed by their circumstances. When Moses came to tell them that their freedom was on the term sheet of the deal that Moses had made with God, what did they do? They turned away. Their lives involved a daily struggle to survive. That was hard enough for them. freedom was not an achievable dream. And there's more. As they actually fled Egypt, their hearts melted. They weighed what little they knew about freedom, and quite frankly, they were willing to go back to Egypt, abandon the exercise, go back to a guaranteed 3 meals a day and a warm bed in a slave's hut. It's hard to know just when the Israelites decided that they really wanted freedom. But this is clear. Only when they wanted to be free could they secure freedom for themselves. Next, freedom is not a passive state. If you are indifferent to freedom, if you are functionally unaware that freedom is available to you, if you don't exercise freedom, then you are not free. If you confront desperate moral and ethical challenges, but somehow can't get your act together sufficiently so that you can join with others who want to make the world a little bit better, then you are not free. You're trapped by inertia. You are ensnared by a million petty distractions. You are lulled to sleep by external comforts. The Israelites had to learn through 40 years of wandering that their freedom, real freedom, required them to care for the widow and the orphan, the poor and the ill, the helpless, and those whose minds and spirits are somehow broken. The prophets Jeremiah and Ezekiel later taught that before our people could truly be free, there would have to be what they would term a second Exodus, during which the crippling residue of slavery and of passivity would be removed. Next, just like passivity under slavery is a learned behavior, so is freedom a learned behavior. You don't just inherit a positive view about freedom. A love of freedom is not something that a child can inherit like a trust fund. A love of freedom is not a part of the human DNA. That's why the Torah repeats over and over again, teach your children. Remind them that their family had been enslaved. Remind them that the freedom that their family has now was hard earned. And remind them that they will never truly be free until they possess and live what freedom has to offer. Lastly, you are never truly free if you keep your freedom just for yourselves. The Torah, let's admit it, surely a document that reflects the age in which it was developed, nevertheless struggled to ease the burden of slaves. Now, Torah, not a document that condemned slavery, still insisted that slaves were human beings that had certain rights. We were told constantly to remember that we once were slaves, and to never act so as to deny slaves their very humanity. Our farmland is to enjoy periods of freedom from being worked. Our farm animals, the same thing. Even in the direst of circumstances, we must constantly remind ourselves we were slaves in Egypt. We experienced what slavery can do to the human soul. So even captured prisoners of war must have their humanity preserved. The entire Exodus account is a tutorial about freedom. You are never free until you truly desire to be free. And freedom is not something to be experienced in a passive state. Freedom is something that you do. We are not free if we're not working to share the blessing of freedom with others. Freedom is a muscle that has to be exercised. Freedom is a learned behavior. It is a value that demands that we teach to our children. And finally, we are not truly free until we share our freedom with others. That's it. Shabbat Shalom. Happy celebration of Martin Luther King and freedom this weekend. Pray for the peace in the Middle East and pray for the release of all hostages. See you next week.